So think of how beautiful that is. So you've got a beautiful plate of food, all those wonderful colors, the rich nutrients, the vitamins, the minerals, those omega-3s, all those things. Your body is just happy. It's feeling amazing. It's, you walk away feeling satisfied without feeling sluggish.
I'm your host, Kim Hines, and welcome to the Emotional Eats podcast. I'm on a mission to show you that what you consume, not just the food, affects your entire life. Midlife is different. Let's dig into the real reasons why you eat when you're not hungry and why you're not feeling well. My guests and I are going to give you doable solutions and help you let go of perfectionism, food rules, and stress to make changes that will last a lifetime. If you're ready to ditch old school diet culture and nourish your entire life, this is the show for you. Welcome to episode 2 of the Emotional Eats podcast. Today, you will meet Melissa Slemp, who is a certified nutritional and hormone health coach and a personal trainer, and also a really good friend. Melissa helps women who are diagnosed with type 1 diabetes to feel more empowered and live their best life despite their diagnosis. She owns Abundant Health with Melissa and has been managing her own type 1 diabetes for over 40 years. This conversation is amazing because when women are going through midlife changes, they often blame themselves for these normal changes. So if you're one of those women and you often turn to dieting without understanding the blood sugar connection, this is a great episode for you because Melissa explains the connection between the hormone changes and blood sugar. Melissa does a wonderful job of talking about her balanced plate philosophy and how beneficial a healthy lifestyle can be to managing blood sugar. She also talks about the importance of exercise in helping to stabilize blood sugar. And of course, we address one of my favorite topics, cravings for food, and how these might also be affected by blood sugar. You can find Melissa on Instagram at Blood Sugar Boss, and she really is the blood sugar boss. Enjoy the show and let me know what you think. Hi, Melissa. Welcome to the show.
Hello, Kim. I'm excited to be here talking about one of my favorite topics.
I'm really excited because I get to share not only one of my favorite health coaches, but just for the listeners to know, you are also a really good friend of mine. Mm-hmm. And I love your story and how you help women. So I want to share you with the world. So let's start there. Would you share with everyone your story about your health? Because we're talking specifically today about blood sugar, and I'd love for your story to come out. But also, how did that lead you to helping other people with some of the same issues?
Yeah, I'd be happy to share. Yes. I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when I was a teenager. So I was 14 years. I just celebrated my diaversary, as we call it in the diabetic community, 41 years. And it was never I guess now I celebrate it because I know that this diagnosis many years ago really was a gift because it's something that I have found a way to live and thrive through. And now I have the opportunity to share it with other women, to get them to that same stage. And just to kind of clarify too, type 1 diabetes is insulin dependent diabetes. There tends to be a lot of confusion as to what diabetes is and, what that means for people. And, there's different types, there's type 1, there's type 2, there's that pre-phase, which is called the pre-diabetes. So these might be some common terms that we hear thrown around out there. And it's real important just to understand the difference. So insulin dependent, meaning since day one, I've had to manually take insulin. And if you would like, I can explain what insulin is right now. But right now I am working as a health coach, and I specialize helping midlife women get through not only the practical day-to-day steps that is required, just to manage our disease and our blood sugar, but also the emotional side too, just dealing with it and accepting with it and coming to terms with it.
That's great. And I think it would be wonderful we start talking about insulin and hormones in general, like insulin, because not everyone is type 1, but everyone is still having to manage that. So yes, let's talk about that. Tell me more about insulin.
Yes, it's a buzzword right now, because it is, the metabolic health is definitely something we're hearing more and more about. People are more aware of what's going on with their metabolism, and insulin is part of that, obviously, along with the female hormones, because the reproductive hormones. I know that we'll get into that further. But insulin is a hormone made in your pancreas. And like in my case, my pancreas no longer makes insulin. So we have to manually, as I say it, inject it. Or in some cases, whether it's injections or an insulin pump, or there's different ways, there's different insulin delivery methods. I myself am still on injections. So I've never been on the insulin pump. So this is a gland. It's located right behind your stomach. And it allows your body to use glucose for energy. So, and glucose is a type of sugar found in many carbohydrates. So, and it's really a funny topic because people, they hear diabetes and they just normally assume that, we can't have sugar, we can't have desserts. And that is true to a sense, because those simple sugars are really, they have a direct, quick impact on our blood sugar levels. And as diabetics, we are trying to keep those levels in balance the best we can. It is like a math problem. And it's the 2 + 2 that really never seems to equal 4, because there's other factors going in that actually do determine how our body responds to the insulin on board and all of that. So again, there's a lot of different steps to it, but basically insulin is a hormone in the body that interacts with other hormones in the body, and it determines how we feel and how our body functions.
It really does. And we will get into some of those hormones. And I would love for you, let's start with, since our audience is 40 and over, going through the menopausal stages, how does that affect our blood sugar, and vice versa? How is that affecting us? And can you talk to that about how people are feeling, and are they forgetting about blood sugar? Are they only looking at all these other symptoms?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it points to a client story that I'll tell you in just a moment. But when we're going through these drops in hormones, and that can start later in life, it's usually late 40s is when, and it can really start at any age, as we know. That's another whole podcast topic, when menopause hits women, because it's so unique and different for all of us. But our estrogen levels, and that is the primary one involved with this, because when estrogen is low, our insulin sensitivity drops. So we're less sensitive to the insulin our body is producing. So we will point to the resistant side. And that's a term a lot of us are used to. We've heard of insulin resistance. That is pointing to prediabetes. That is pointing to type 2 diabetes. And basically what that is that your body is no longer functioning at its best. It's taking more insulin in order to process that glucose and use it for energy. And insulin itself is a fat storing hormone. Boy, that kind of hits a nerve, doesn't it? But it's good to have this information. It's to understand really what's going on and all these different factors in hormones and how they balance each other out, and what is going on in that stage of a woman's life. And it is a natural stage. It's not something that you're doing wrong or that you're doing bad. It is the natural stage. It is something we can all expect. Now, when I was in my late 40s, I was going through perimenopause. That was my time. And I had always been, up to this point, very, very routine. I love good, healthy, balanced meals. I'm very active. So I was kind of dialed in with my insulin therapy, and my weight was always stable. Everything was just right on target, year after year after year. Then suddenly, after getting tested, of course, because I actually had to get tested, to get my hormone levels tested, just to really understand what was going on. But I suddenly needed more insulin for the same lifestyle that I was living. And that included the food, the diet, and all of that. Diet and exercise. I'm sorry. And so I went from, it was almost a 50% increase in insulin. So that explained the fact that my estrogen was dropping. So I understood after getting tested that was the reason this was happening for my body, why my body required more insulin. So I was becoming insulin resistant, type 1 diabetic, and the insulin I was injecting was no longer working as well. So my body was saying, I need more insulin. Well, guess what? That extra insulin, I was putting on weight. So it all figured itself out once I got the facts and I got a clearer vision of really what was happening. And I'm not saying I was happy about it, but it was sure nice knowing that there was a reason for this. And it wasn't anything serious, per se. It was something that I would have to work on and adjust and have some patience through. And that's what's happening for all of us, whether or not our pancreas is making the insulin or not. This is all part of that stage of life.
And it's really nice to hear, because when we're going through the challenges of perimenopause, menopause, we can blame it on a lot of different things. And sadly, women blame it on themselves. They're not dieting enough. They're not working out enough. And even though we will get to this, those are very important, the food and the movement, and that's important for everyone. But we put a lot of blame on ourselves because we really don't understand all the mechanisms that are happening in our bodies. And when you can explain that and help people understand, and I think it's really interesting because as a type 1 diabetic, you're speaking to it in a way that actually is helping people who aren't type 1, because it's still something they have to pay attention to. We're getting some of the same symptoms, the weight gain around the middle, the craviness, the agitation, the anxiety. Some of those other symptoms are showing up. So you were talking about a client before we got on. You had a really good example of someone that you've helped through this process. So share about that, please.
Yeah, please. Yes, she came to me and she was approaching menopause. She was kind of the tail end of perimenopause. She was in her early 50s and she was on her health. She was getting regular checkups. So she knew what her levels were, throughout her life. So she was in tune with her health. So she was told that her blood sugars, her fasting blood sugars were starting to rise. And that it was something that she needed to be, to learn more about and to find out, how this was going to kind of play out for her. So she came to me and she was just a perfect example of that time of life, no diabetes diagnosis, but getting that warning that, hey, your fasting blood sugar is starting to get a little high. She was putting on some weight. She wasn't understanding why that was happening. She was also having some of the typical menopausal symptoms, lower energy, unable to sleep at night, her sleep disturbances and stuff like that, lower energy, like I said, and headaches was another thing that she was experiencing. So it was perfect for her, because it's nice when you can come in on the front end and look at the numbers and see where you are, and then look closer at maybe what you're doing. And it wasn't like a microscope, because I don't coach that way either. I definitely, we don't pick apart what they do. We just look at it and find some healthier options, some things that we can kind of crowd out and bring in some healthier ways to do that fits in with their lifestyle, because it is all about that. It is about being happy with what you get to eat every day, and fitting in exercise when it's convenient for you and all of that. So she ended up in just a few months realizing this and going through some steps that were sustainable that she continues to sustain now. And she got into just more of a routine and realizing what was more important. Hydration was a lot of that as well. One of those easy things that we talk about that people forget about that have so much, that just play a big factor. It actually helps with insulin sensitivity too, as does sleep. So these things that she kind of fine-tuned. She lost 10 pounds in those a couple months. And she felt like she was still approaching menopause. She knew it was coming, but she felt more empowered knowing what was going on and what she would have to continue to do to kind of mitigate those symptoms and, to feel good about, a healthy weight.
That's wonderful. And it's great that you can bring in the other lifestyle factors, because we really, when we look at our health, reduce everything down to just food and exercise. And that's what we see. That's what we see in the diet culture, that's how we fix everything. I'm curious because we talked about the hormones, and once we know what's going on with, everybody looks at the sex hormones during menopause, the estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. And I don't think even everyone gets those tested, but that's a great place to know, regardless of what you choose to do with that. No one is being forced into hormone replacement therapy. It's just a way for us to check it out and see where things are to understand how our bodies are reacting. But I would love if you would share too, someone's having a standard blood test and they might be wanting to look a little bit deeper into the blood sugar issue. What are some things that they can ask for or look for in their blood work?
Yeah, great question too. This is a new test that doctors are starting to do, but it's very, very telling of really what's going on in the body. And that is getting your insulin levels tested. And that is saying, and this is a fasting test as well. And this is a funny story too, because this is not something, because I'm the tester, I like to find out where things are. I'm always curious as to how my body's functioning as well. And I thought about getting this done myself. And I was talking with some other people with type 1, and we're like, well, that wouldn't make much sense. I mean, because, we know what we're taking, because we have to dial it up and inject it every day. So the fact that we would know what our fasting blood sugar is, or what our fasting insulin levels would not be a very important piece of information for us. But for somebody who is not diagnosed, the ideal number is 5 or below. And anytime it gets over, they say 6 or 7 is when that is a really good indication that the body, again, is producing too much insulin. So it's trying to keep up with the glucose that is coming through the system, and it's working hard to do that. So that is a magical test to get done. And I'm so happy to hear that primary care is finally starting to add that in. It could just be simply part of your blood work. It doesn't take a whole lot of extra effort for them to test that. And of course, once we get older, they are testing for the fasting glucose levels, which is another important number. A1C is the average blood sugar over 3 months. And those are tests that I get done regularly as a type 1. That's how I monitor my care and, how my body's doing. And it tells me, what, as far as, the insulin I'm taking, how it's working over time, just to mitigate any sort of complications and other issues with the body. So yeah, those are 2 really good tests that tell a lot. And it's interesting too, because you can get the numbers, but you've got to do something with the numbers, and you have to understand the numbers, and you have to have a doctor that's going to understand and maybe sit down with you. And that's when a health coach is such a great thing to have in your toolbox. Somebody that can kind of help you and help guide you with the conversation with your doctor to know what to ask, what to what you could take from them as far as a direction to work with a health coach on, because we don't replace doctors. We just kind of support the findings and try to get you to where you need to be.
That's great. Yes. And I know as a health coach, you're really amazing at helping people develop the habits that they need to make those changes, because most people know some of the things that they need to do. It's actually taking the steps to do them.
That's for sure.
And I'd love to move into some of the things that we can do to help find this. We love this word balance in our lives. And I wanted to start with when we have blood sugar issues, and I even know this for myself, whether I'm high or low feeling. And the wonderful thing about having one of your best friends as a diabetes health coach is I have even tested my own blood sugar with different foods just to experiment and see why I'm feeling a certain way. I don't do it with everything, but I know when I'm not feeling well after a certain food. But I also know that it affects my cravings. It affects the eating that I do. We already have things that are affecting us during the day, emotions, we have stress, we have all these other things that we think are causing us to eat when we're not hungry, but blood sugar could actually be one of them. Can you talk about that connection, about why blood sugar may affect our feelings about food at that time?
Oh my gosh, you nailed it. Because how did you know that when our blood sugar rises, and I know this living with type 1, because we have that monitor that's telling us that we're high, and then suddenly we are craving more sweets. That is a physiological fact. And I can tell you that does happen. And again, it's because your body is, the system cannot get rid of the glucose. So it's circulating it. The insulin's being pumped through the system. And the more insulin you have, the more glucose it wants. So it's craving more to kind of keep up with that overproduction of insulin. It's a terrible cycle, isn't it? Sounds horrible. So, but again, it's like you say, just being aware of that, well, again, it does come back to whether or not you do have some high glucose or high insulin levels. So knowing the facts. But I like what you said too, Kim, about just being in tune with what foods are making you feel this way. And it does tend to be the simple carbs. And when you get away from the balanced plate, which I know you and I both eat this way and coach this way, how important it is to have, just a really good, well-balanced meal. Even snacks should be this way as well, because it's going to avoid the blood sugar spike. It's going to avoid that craving for more sugar, carbohydrates. An hour later, we're not satisfied. We want more. That's when we're, at any time that we're, we're leaving the fat and the protein out of a meal, it's detrimental. It really is.
It really is. And having that time frame in between meals is really important to have that blood sugar coming back down. And I think sometimes when we let it go too far down, that's also the opposite of having that high. We're tired, we're low. We have a really big opportunity to overeat and binge because we haven't kept that in check. It's like our hunger cues. But I would like for you to be really specific about when you're trying to help someone. Let's talk about the plate, the balanced plate. You alluded to a little bit of it. Let's talk about that whole plate. What goes on that plate? And when we eat that, and I know this is different for every person, but maybe also share about how long should that keep us full? Again, we're all different, and I understand that, just so that we're not dipping in, because we all know that when we're dipping in between meals, snacks are not always the whole food snacks. We're reaching for whatever's easy, whatever's going to, take care of that hunger, but it's not really taking care of the hunger, and it's usually spiking the blood sugar. Yes. So let's talk about your balanced plate.
Yeah. And I like that, because it all does point to feeling satisfied, not only emotionally, but physically, and our belly to be satisfied, satiated, right? I love the word satiated. Balanced plate for me, I always begin with vegetables, and vegetables there's two different types of vegetables. There's starchy and there's non-starchy. The starchy they tend to be the potatoes, the carrots, the peas, the corn. What am I leaving out? Some of the squashes and stuff like that. They tend to be a little bit higher in the carbohydrate load on the body. So when we can start with the non-starchy, which is the beautiful greens and, the peppers and the mushrooms and things like that. The list is endless. There's definitely a long list of both, the non-starchy and the starchy available to make a plate of delicious food. And then adding to that a source of protein. And, portion size is really important as well for all of us, because the body doesn't, and especially women, I always use the palm as our measuring tool, because, the bigger your palm, or the palm kind of fits what fits for you as far as portion size. And again, there's no judgment with this. It's just a general idea. Start with that. And that's 3 to 4 ounces for a woman. Men can generally tolerate a little bit more. Again, all this is so unique because it does depend on our lifestyle, our activity level, what demands that we may have on our body. So this is kind of a general rule. And then adding in healthy fat, that's real important to help satiate us. There's that word again. And to help us feel fuller. And our body loves healthy fats, our glands, our joints, all those things, our brain health. So think of how beautiful that is. So you've got a beautiful plate of food, all those wonderful colors, the rich nutrients, the vitamins, the minerals, those omega-3s, all those things. Your body is just happy. It's feeling amazing. It's, you walk away feeling satisfied without feeling sluggish. I think that's one of the biggest things that I've found. Again, when I think back to my earlier years with managing diabetes and how I used to eat, it was, I didn't really have a concept of food. I really didn't understand food, didn't understand carbohydrates. I ate a lot more carbohydrates and I was taking more insulin. And I also felt lousy all the time. Okay. So and it's funny how you don't put that together at the time. You just think it's something else, or, it was this, it was that. You don't realize that, no, food does affect how you feel. Physically and, our thinking, our focus and all of that. So I always think of food as, obviously food is a fuel and it's good for us. It's going to give us what we need, but balanced is beautiful. And it is about combining those macronutrients to make up a plate that's going to give us what we need.
And I really appreciate that you said it can be very emotionally satisfying also, because we are emotional beings. We're not robots. And when we eat, we want food that has nice texture. It tastes good. It keeps us full longer. And I appreciate that because we do tend to eat emotionally and not always eat what we need. If we are not satisfied, we tend to keep going. So I love that. And it's really funny. Here's a little tidbit from the Melissa Kim friendship story. I actually met Melissa in the gym. And so this is a great segue to ask you, Melissa, how important is exercise when we are dealing with our blood sugar? Because we put a lot of stock in food, which is extremely important. Mm-hmm. But how is exercise helping you to manage your diabetes?
Oh, it is a game changer. I notice the days that I'm not as active, as opposed to the days that I tend to be very active every day. And the body just needs more insulin. And that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with what I'm eating, because I do tend to eat very similar, the similar types of foods. But insulin helps us become more sensitive to, there's that word again, insulin. So again, we want our insulin to be functioning well. We want whatever we have on board to be, and we want that at a low level, remember, because we do want our insulin levels lower. So we want what we do have on board, whether we're making it naturally, with our pancreas, or injecting it manually like I have to do. We want it to be efficient. And that's what exercise does. It just makes such a big difference. And it's affecting other things as well. We know it makes us feel happy. It gives us more energy. We sleep better. we tend to stay more hydrated when we're exercising, because again, exercise and, it's that thing that we say, because when we're working out, we tend to drink more, but it definitely goes hand in hand, and we sleep better. All those things help our insulin sensitivity. So it's just a wonderful, sweet web that when it's happy, when it's going, when it's in balance, exercise really does, it complements that math problem that I was talking about, that food, exercise, carbohydrate, insulin math problem. Exercise is a huge bonus.
That's great. And I have also found that I feel better after I walk after eating a meal.
Yes,
So
definitely.
how is that affecting my blood sugar if I've already eaten a meal and I'm done? Because I'll tell you, the walking is another thing for me besides probably helping the blood sugar, but I also do not immediately crave the sweets if I go take the walk first. So that's actually a two-part question for you. One, how's the walking affecting the blood sugar? And two, is that part of what happens because of our insulin changing maybe with our meal, why we may want sweets afterwards? Is that a physiological aspect also?
Oh my gosh, yes, absolutely. I mean, exercise especially, because that's something that we should be doing. If that's something that you can fit in, whether it's after breakfast, lunch, or dinner, is to take that walk. And it doesn't have to be crazy. Take a walk around the block, 20, 30 minutes if you can. Grab the dog, take him with you. They'll love it too. But it helps to move the glucose. So again, if you're not a diabetic, your body is going to help to utilize whatever you had for lunch or dinner or whatever that meal was. It's going to utilize it. So instead of the insulin having to get secreted from the pancreas to do the job, the exercise will do the job. So again, we always want our blood sugar back to that happy balance. I don't think we talked about that. Really, after a meal, we want to be between 80 and 110. That's milligrams per deciliter. And yeah, that's the magic number. Again, the average person doesn't necessarily have a glucometer to test this. And that is something that you could do, just to gather this information, because we learn a lot when we see the trends and we start to see what helps with our blood sugar, before, what it is before a meal, what it is after a meal, how exercise affects it, and all of that. So yeah, get out there and walk. Take that walk.
Not the average person testing their blood sugar. How do you feel about the trend that a lot of people that do not have diabetes are wearing CGMs? And can you explain what a CGM is, Debbie?
I sure can. I wear one myself. Yes, it's a continuous glucose monitor that is it's a sensor that is injected into your subcutaneously in my case, it's my arm. That's where I hold mine. And it's giving us constant blood sugar numbers. It is a pretty cool tool. So it's like, I kind of feel like I'm a science experiment, because we are walking, talking information of what food, exercise, stress, all these variables, how it's impacting our glucose levels. And to get that feedback, because it's a great system that is speaking to you, telling you what's working, what needs to be adjusted, because that is really how we base our insulin dosing. It's based on where we are before we eat. And then we calculate the best we can what our carbohydrates are. And then we're going to do an insulin dose based on getting back to that goal blood sugar number. I think I did mention it's like a math problem. But it's an amazing tool, and it's definitely on the trend right now. I think it's important, at society, we're getting more in tune with how our body's operating and trying to optimize and live our best. And yeah, it's definitely something to check out if that's something that you can get your doctor to write a prescription for. Or
it seems like a great tool. And I feel like people, like you said, are optimizing their health by really looking at those numbers and understanding how everything that they do throughout the day affects their glucose. And speaking of that, let's talk about stress and cortisol. What's the connection between the rise in cortisol when we are stressed and your glucose? How is that affecting? And I know it can go both ways.
Sure can. Yeah. So stress cortisol, which is produced by the adrenal glands, and that's, and that's a healthy stress, or I should say that's a healthy gland. It's there to protect us. It's there to tell the liver that, okay, if your body is under stress, it's going to basically pump out glucose. So it's going to take glycogen from the liver, put it into your bloodstream to protect you, to keep you safe, because, back in the day, that's what we needed when we were being chased by tigers in the woods, right? Just so that we had the energy to survive. Well, nowadays, we tend to be more chronic stress, which is a sad state. So our bodies, in most cases, if we're not aware of this situation, our body is always producing this insulin. And again, it's different for everybody, and it may not be an issue for everybody, but it's definitely something to be aware of. And extra cortisol, again, is pumping more glucose through your system. So guess what that's doing? It's pumping more insulin through our system. So guess what that's doing? That is causing us stress, obviously, and then it's putting on weight. And it points to so many other disease, not only diabetes, type 2 diabetes. It's a very common link with diagnosis of type 2 diabetes is those high cortisol levels. So, yeah.
So in addition to the balance plate and exercise, managing your stress, and there's so many ways out there now to do it, meditation and tapping, getting some alone time, whatever your method is, let's bring down that stress also. So I ask all of my guests this question. If you could give 3 tips, if you had someone who's just starting off and they need to nourish their life, what are the top 3 things that you would tell them to start with?
Oh, wow. Just 3. I would say to just get to know yourself, to be more in tune with who you are and what you need as a person, and to be kind to yourself, to give yourself lots of love and self-care. And I think as far as just lifestyle-driven habits, and this is what I do myself. This is the things that I try to focus on, but really prioritizing hydration, sleep, and good food, good, healthy, clean food, the best we can. And that's going to support all the things that Kim and I just talked about. It's going to help. It's really about creating that foundation, strengthening our foundation, so our body has a better chance to take care of us, and just having love and support in your life and faith in your life, just having the power of the Holy Spirit in our life. That really does make a big difference in my life, and tapping into that and leaning on that. Yeah.
Those are great tips. And if you could tell everyone, because I know they're going to want more, they're going to want to see more Melissa, tell everyone, where can we find you?
Yes. Well, my website is Abundant Health with Melissa. So you could just visit me on there, and there's lots of ways to connect with me or send me a message. And you can find me on Instagram. My handle is at Blood Sugar Boss, and I love meeting people there. And you can drop me a message in my DM and just let me know what's going on and how if you have any other questions or whatever you may need. I just love to meet and hear from people.
That's great. I'll make sure those are in the show notes for everyone also. And lastly, tell us what you've got going on. What are you doing to help people? Are there programs or anything that you're having? And hint, hint, what do you have coming out in the next month?
I have a podcast coming out in the next month. There is a need for the women in my community. Again, I help type 1 diabetic women just overcome all these things that we talked about. It's very much in tune with what we talked about. It's the same sort of goals that we all have as women as we get past the age of 40. So my podcast is going to be called Type 1 in Midlife. And yeah, I'm real excited to bring that and to create some great conversations and to overcome these struggles. And the most importantly is just to bring people together, because we can't go through this alone. Yeah, community is so important.
That's great. Please reach out to Melissa. Make sure you listen to her podcast. And Melissa, I can't thank you enough. I appreciate you, my friend, for being here with me today.
Oh, my pleasure.
So everyone, yes. And remember to nourish your life and give yourself grace today. I really appreciate you being here. If you resonated with this podcast, it would mean a lot to me if you'd be willing to follow or subscribe to the Emotional Eats podcast. Then you'll never miss an episode. Just go to the Emotional Eats show page on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts, and tap the plus sign in the upper right-hand corner and click on it. While you're there, if you'd be willing to give me a 5-star rating and review, I would be so grateful. If you'd like to take a screenshot and share it on Instagram, just tag me at Kim Hines Health. I would love to hear your thoughts and let me know how I can support you. You can always DM me on Instagram, again, at Kim Hines Health. And just remember to nourish your life and give yourself grace today.